father of the major rank army officer named in the case involving the deaths of 3 civilians in Jammu and Kashmir Shopian has approached the Supreme Court today. His petition challenging the police case said that it violated the officer's fundamental rights. He also appealed that the centre be asked to protect the rights of soldiers who are working in Jammu and Kashmir. The contentious police case that's now turned into a huge political controversy had named the officer and his unit. They were accused of opening fire on a group of protesters in which 3 men died. The army said the soldiers were vastly outnumbered by stone-throwing mobs and opened fire only after the crowd disregarded repeated warnings. Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti had told the J&K Assembly only days earlier that the FIR was registered after she spoke to Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.
The funeral procession of 2 of the men killed in firing by army soldiers in Shopian in South Kashmir on 27 Jan. A 3rd youth died in hospital later. Today, 12 days after the incident, the father of the young Indian Army major who was commanding the soldiers involved in the incident says he wants justice for his son. Lieutenant Colonel Karambir Singh, the father, is also in the army and won't speak to the media. His lawyer says the colonel's son has suffered a great injustice and is being named in the FIR by the police.
Essentially, it is a petition under Article 32 of the Constitution of India, and it is for protection of the valuable fundamental rights which are enshrined and guaranteed to every citizen of the country, irrespective of whether they are, serving officers or soldiers in the army.
On 27 January, a convoy of army vehicles was passing through Shopian when it was attacked by stone pelters. 3 vehicles separated from the convoy to escape the stone pelters. These vehicles were trapped when they hit a dead end. When they tried to reverse, the army says they were surrounded by a mob of more than 200 who nearly killed one of the Jawans. The army says Major Aditya was not even with this group of soldiers when they opened fire in desperation. Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti doesn't accept the army's position and says that her government will pursue this case and they will counter the plea made by Major Aditya in the Supreme Court today.
He has a right to go there, and since it has gone to the highest court of the country, it doesn't lie in my mouth to comment on that. We'll face it in the court.
Will you defend the FIR in the Supreme Court?
For its part, the army has filed a counter FIR against unnamed people in the mob and say the soldiers who opened fire are protected by the Armed Forces Special Protection Act in the disturbed area where they were operating.
This is a highly contentious case. While Major Aditya's father has approached the country's top court, the state government maintains that the FIR file shall be taken to its logical conclusion. Now all eyes are on the Supreme Court when the case will come up for hearing. With Nazir Masoodi in Srinagar, Zafar Iqbal for NDTV.
Well, joining us now to talk more about this story is Aishwarya Bhatti. She is the lawyer who is representing Major Aditya's father there in the Supreme Court. You saw a glimpse of her in the story. Lieutenant General Raj Kadian, the former Deputy Chief of Army Staff, is here in the studio with us. Also with us, Ajay Shukla, who's of course served in the army himself and is now a strategic affairs analyst. Siddiq Wahid is joining us from Kashmir this evening. Jyoti Malhotra, the consulting editor of the Indian Express, also with us. And Mr. Desh Nigam of the RSS is with us tonight. Aishwarya Bhatti, to you first. I just wanted to understand, why this particular FIR has become such a big issue and actually such a big political controversy. It's not the first time that FIRs have been filed against the army in Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, it has happened many times and they've gone on to be quashed in many cases. In other cases, the cases have sort of reached their own conclusion. Why has this particular case, you think, become such a big deal?
So, Nidhi, I'm not going to comment on, why politically it has become such a big deal. The reason why, the father of this young and brave army officer who was exercising his bona fide duties, protecting the dignity of the Indian flag, has been forced to approach the Honorable Supreme Court for quashing of the FIR is essentially on three main grounds. The first is, of course, for protection of valuable fundamental rights. Some portions of fundamental rights of defense forces are curtailed by virtue of the job that they are required to, carry out. That is right of association, right of speech, etc. But the right to life is equally enshrined and guaranteed to every citizen of the country. And, it is not fundamental rights for serving army officers and soldiers are not countenanced or discounted in any manner. And that has now, the second ground is completely directly connected to it, because if an FIR is going to be registered against soldiers who are exercising their bona fide duties, and when the army exercises its bona fide duties, it is in the protection of the sovereignty and integrity of the country. If an FIR is registered in such a scenario, it has a numbing effect on the morale of the forces by and large. And that has a direct impact. In fact, it puts into jeopardy the very security, the very integrity of the nation that they are seeking to protect. So these are the three main grounds why the father, who's himself a Kargil war veteran, felt it was absolutely imperative for him to move the Honorable Supreme Court. We have sought many prayers, quashing of this FIR. We want proper FIR to be registered against the people who are blocking.
Yes, and much of what you're saying is absolutely right. But, except that, of course, things are very difficult for security forces in the Kashmir Valley. I think there's no doubt about that. And that when mobs get out of hand, things can become very dangerous and very difficult. However, there are different versions to this story. The army has one, the civilians on the ground have another, 3 civilians have lost their lives. I think the question in this case, and Aishwarya, before I ask you that, let me ask Ajay that, is, how do we investigate, what really happened? I mean, are we to only believe the version of the authorities, or would it not be fair to have a proper probe into how 3 civilians were killed and what happened?
Well, purely from the legal standpoint, the officer is completely protected. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act guarantees him protection against exactly situations like this. And an FIR has been lodged, but this is more of a token gesture, I feel, on the part of the state government, which is pandering to public anger at the loss of 3 lives. And I don't blame them for what they're doing. But as far as the officer is concerned, he's completely protected. This case is not going to stand up in any court of law. The problem here is that, you have a situation, and every side is allowing this situation to persist and to continue. In the absence of a dialogue between Kashmir, absence of a healing process, every little situation on the ground there is inflammatory, it's liable to blow up, and a situation like this can arise at either time. So for that, I squarely blame the central government. At the same time, I also blame the stone pelters over there. When you go and start attacking, and a mob is a very scary thing.
Yeah, it is.
When you start attacking,
and pelting isn't
soldiers,
exactly the word. It's actually, they're throwing heavy rocks.
So you see, where the whole argument against revoking AFSPA and lifting AFSPA, and I am one of those who believe that AFSPA needs to be calmed down and toned down and eventually gradually lifted, that logic gets a complete hammering with an incident like this. Because everybody gets up and rightly says, here you are, this is the need for AFSPA. It's exactly for situations like this that AFSPA was made. So both sides are to blame over here, and this is a situation that both sides are allowing to continue, and everybody's getting hurt.
General Kadia, it's again, as I say, a very, very difficult position for the army to be in. How does one, though, walk that tightrope between ensuring that the army can fearlessly perform its duties and be safe and secure while it does that, and yet the human rights of those on the ground are also protected? Innocent people. I'm not talking here about people who are throwing stones with an aim to kill or hurt, but just innocent people who often do get caught in the firing or get targeted. How do you balance this out? How do you have accountability?
Nidhi, let me say, with all my experience of having operated in these areas for a fairly long time, army has a system. No army can allow its soldiers to run amok and be indisciplined. Then you can't run the army. I have myself awarded death sentence to a soldier who was wrong. He had murdered 2 civilians in cold blood. Secondly, the Armed Forces Special Power Act, it every time becomes a target. No army in the world has ever operated in civil situation without legal protection. This act was not demanded by the army. It was passed by the parliament in 1958. It gives legal cover to the army personnel deployed in those areas. it has been misconstrued to mean that they have got full freedom to commit murder and rape and mayhem. No, it only gives certain rights that you can apprehend a person, you can interrogate him before you hand over to the civil police, and in case you feel there is a public property being destroyed or security being disturbed, you can even use force. Police already has these powers, so there is nothing special about it. Now, coming back to Colonel Karamveer's action, I fully empathize with him as a father that he is worried and is concerned about the welfare of his son. And he has a full right to go to the court. But this action willy-nilly might convey wrong impression that the army has left the family to fend for itself. Army fully protects its soldiers and officers because Major Aditya Kumar was not there on a family commitment. He was not there on a personal pilgrimage. He was sent there without his consent and possibly against his will. He was forced into a difficult situation where he has acted in self-defense. You can see the 8 soldiers were in hospital with head wound. The windshields of the vehicles were broken. Stones are pelted with the clear intention of causing injury and death.
And worse, yeah.
So here we have a very strange case by the state government that the victim is being prosecuted and the villains are being sympathized with. You are lifting their, giving them amnesty.
Let me take what you said. Let me take what you said, sir.
So I don't think the army.
Okay, let me take what you said, sir, to Siddiq Wahid, who's joining us from Srinagar. Siddiq, General Kadian said here is a case of the victim being prosecuted. Is that how it is being seen there? I think the problem is, and I think Ajay pointed that out very well, is that there are such dangerous binaries right now in this country and in Jammu and Kashmir in particular that no one's willing to take a step back and try and look at the situation dispassionately. Do you think that is, what is happening here?
I think so. I mean, really, my problem is to try to understand the logic of what is going on here. As Ajay was implying, I think that this is really a non-debate. I mean, in the sense that what do we have? What are the facts? The facts are that 3 young men by the name of Javed Bhatt, Suhail Lone, and Rais Ganai are dead. They were civilians. I don't know whether they were armed with stones, but they were not armed with weapons. And in the melee, as you said, there are several versions of this, that there was a killing of 3 people, 3 young men. Number 2, in sort of, an arm of the state of J&K, that is the police, have filed an FIR, an FIR to find out the circumstances under which these killings took place, which is, we've talked a lot about human rights or citizens' rights, well, which is the right of the family and the parents of these children, young men, to find out. And that, countering that, is that no, you are not even allowed to inquire into this, is that you should therefore stay away from it completely, and that the person who has been sort of pointed out in the FIR, I say pointed out because I don't know if an FIR is directly an accusation, but whatever it is therefore not even subject to an inquiry of some sort to find out how it is happening. This is happening from the central government or the army, let's put it that way, rather than the central government. Now, one wing of the state sort of moving against another wing of the state, which has an irony of itself. Now, my point is that if this prosecution ever took place, and which is not going to take place thanks to AFSPA, and the whole thing, because if it were to take place, the central government would have to give the state government permission for this. Do you see it happening? I mean, I don't. Why would they? And as a result of which, we have somewhat of a cynical hypocrisy of discussing as to why, and what is happening over here. It's very simple. 3 young people are dead. We're not going to know the circumstances under which they've been killed, and that is the sad part. You're saying, what is the mood here? There's another mood of cynicism. This is par for the course. This is what happens all the time. So much as I appreciate, a discussion about it, the point is that, we all sort of know that this is going nowhere.
You know, I think that's a very good point, and I want to take that to Jyoti, that unfortunately that has happened where civilians have been killed, encounters have happened, even fake encounters have happened, army has court-martialed, and we've seen, you know, what has happened subsequently in some very big cases. I think there's a question of accountability. How, you know, who is going to be held accountable when innocent civilians are killed? Is there ever going to be a probe that is fair, that, you know, and that once it reaches its conclusion actually leads to some kind of accountability? And then there is, of course, you know, the army caught in this sort of mess in the valley right now, which is a pretty scary situation to be in.
I think that's the point, Nidhi, that the army is caught between unsuspecting innocent people and stone pelters who are also angered, who are also at their wits' end. And I think that's the tragedy of the Kashmir Valley, which is, and remember, Nidhi, we're in 2018, it's going to be nearly 30 years since the problem started in 1989. Now, for an army which is supposed to guard your nation's borders and frontiers, to be face to face, to be cheek by jowl with civilians is not the best of situations. So I think everybody is jumpy. And of course, like you said, and we've all seen how on social media, when the stone pelters are, these are not stones that they're throwing, they're chucking huge rocks at army men who are doing their job, and that's acceptable and very well taken. But I think Sadiq has a point. These 3 young boys that he named, now they're dead. How does that happen? Should their parents also go to the Supreme Court and say, like Aishwarya Bhatti said on behalf of Lieutenant Colonel Karambir Singh, and I'm totally on Aishwarya's side, but I'm asking you, should these 3 sets of parents whose boys have been killed also go to the Supreme Court and say that there is a fundamental right to life and that my children have been killed? So I think that's the tragedy of Kashmir today. Now, if you're saying to me that the central government has to give permission and only then can any sort of an FIR, which in any case this young major has been protected by because of AFSPA, but nothing can happen because the central government will or will not give permission. Now, does that show to you that Mehbooba Mufti, who is in coalition with the BJP government and who herself is saying that what has happened is wrong and that there will be an FIR filed because the FIR could not have been filed by the police without her sanction in a sense. So what is she saying to her own BJP government? She's basically, this is a cry for help, and she's appealing to her own coalition partner, which in this case is the BJP, is that you have to have some sort of a healing process. It's been 3 years since this government came to power. It's midway in its tenure. But there's been nothing at all. Even if you say that you know, that there are very few, that there are a handful of people, 50, 60, 70 people who are creating mayhem on the streets. The fact is that who is reaching out to this? And how is Mehbooba's, how are you going to strengthen her hands in talking to her own people? So I think it's really sad. I think that's the tragedy.
Yeah, Mr. Nigam, the strange thing in all of this is that Mehbooba Mufti told the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly that this FIR was registered only after she spoke to Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. So clearly the centre knew. Mrs. Sitharaman hasn't denied it.
See, knowing and taking permissions are 2 different things. No process on record has been initiated. And just talking to the Defence Minister would not give you a right. You work on certain process and procedures. And this clearly is a political statement that we spoke to. We don't know what she spoke to.
Well, the Defence Minister hasn't denied anything the Chief Minister has said.
Speaking, as I rightly pointed out, that speaking is different from taking permission. Under the Act, you need to take a specific permission for lodging an FIR. Let me straighten certain facts out here which were given by Mr. Wahid Siddiqui. He started from the death. Siddiqui. He started from the fact of the killing of 3 people. If you notice, the peaceful convoy was moving and they were pelted with stones. They had to take action in defense. And so far as Jyoti's assertion that their fundamental rights were not given due attention to, if you notice, these stone pelters, violent mob themselves compromised their fundamental right. It was not the army that compromised their fundamental right. When you come on the streets and throw huge rocks, you are yourself compromising the your own fundamental right to life. So that distinction has to be made out here. It is not the army which went to their homes and attack them.
But then are we going to kill everyone who's throwing stones in J&K?
Now, if you have to take an action in self-defense, that is permitted in law.
No, except I'm only saying, and you're right, of course, if a violent mob has tried to attack an army convoy, they obviously have to retaliate. The problem is that when 3 civilians have died, do any of us really know the circumstances in which that happened, and how do we find that out?
But has the BJP asked?
I am not against an inquiry.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
See, a first information is just a first information without an inquiry. It is a report of an incident which is taking place. Therefore, an inquiry should have been instituted. I am not against an inquiry.
Well, a magisterial one has been ordered by the Chief Minister.
So let the fact finding come, and it should not be biased. It should not be a biased inquiry. It should be taking every facts into consideration. A peaceful convoy was moving. Army did not go and attack anybody. It took action under self-defense. So therefore, you need to keep that in mind. The difficult circumstances the army is working. No doubt.
I don't think anybody doubts that.
We recognize.
But Ajay,
and at the same time, let me point out, at the same time, the alternative process of mediation is also going on because of Devdutt Sharma, who has been appointed, who is also meeting. But you at the same time cannot leave.
Deveshwar Sharma,
Deveshwar Sharma.